Hey, this is Jonathan Gilliam. I'm about to start the show, but everybody keeps telling me they want me to make my commercials for my books shorter. But good grief, I feel like it's so important that I have to tell you exactly what these books can do for you. But I'm going to make it shorter, so here goes. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. It's a best-selling book. It will teach you how to look at yourself and your life and your business and your home and your school from the attacker's point of view. There's 2 workbooks that go with it, the Threat Assessment Workbook and the Defense Assessment Workbook. Those are fillable with the knowledge that you get out of Sheep No More. And then for the children, The Adventures of Team Little Bigs, a parent's book for children. The children get the book with the pictures. It has all the lessons built into the pictures. And the parents can go to teamlittlebigs.com, download the lesson plans, and then teach their children through the books. There, I did it in under a minute. Let's start the show. This is Jonathan Gilliam back on the Experts Podcast. Booyah! The truth has arrived. Now, I didn't start with a soundbite today, and the reason I didn't start with it is because I've got a humdinger of a soundbite that I'm actually going to do the show on. This is what I'm going to talk about for the show, and it hopefully will give you a lot of insight, because when I was listening to it, man, the stuff was just jumping out at me, and I was like, man, this is it. I've got to show people the reality of the doublespeak of the federal government, and in particular, the director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, who is, I don't know if you realize this, in a long series of FBI directors that were attorneys for the DOJ before they become the FBI director. Louis Freeh was the last time that we had a director that was actually a former FBI special agent. So this is an excellent opportunity to show you, because Bret Baier, who, you know, I think Bret Baier does a pretty good job. His show's kind of boring, and I think he's an excellent reporter because he shows very little bias when he discusses the stuff on his show. But his guests are horrible. They're always like other journalists or editors. You never see, like, on his show they talk about Christopher Wray. They're never going to have an FBI agent on there to talk about Christopher Wray. I don't know why he does it like that. I don't know why a lot of these news shows do that, but they do. And so you get basically them just regurgitating stuff. They reach out to guys like me. They get the information, and then they go up there and they feed it as though it's their opinion. And that happens more often than not on all these news shows now. Most of the people that you see as the guest on news shows get their information from other people that are actual experts. And the ones that actually go up there and try to BS their way through it probably got the majority of their information from the news, to tell you the truth. Or years ago, they were in and around people who were operational. There's tons of people like Omarosa. You know, Omarosa, the loudmouth that got fired by the Trump administration. So she is a loudmouth, and, you know, I remember when she was on The Apprentice, she talked about how she worked in the White House, and yada. She kept bringing that up, yada, yada, yada. I worked in the White House. Well, what did you do in the White House? I mean, what did you go to the White House with? What experience did you take when you got there, and really just use it to the full capacity that it should be used in your field in which you worked inside the White House? Well, most of the people that show up there have very little experience in anything else. It's more of they get chosen because of who they know, not what they know. And you would think it would be different, but that's not the case. Now, there's advisors that are like generals and admirals. We see how that's working out. who they don't use ever in the White House are people who've had a varied career path, like served in the military, was in law enforcement for 15 years or 10 years. Somebody who's done multiple things, went on to get degrees. Somebody who was enlisted for 20 years and got out as an E7 or E8, being operational the entire time. They don't reach out for those people. I don't know why. Those are your ground pounders, the people that know the majority of stuff. And they're not, most of the people that go there are not well-rounded. Even when they do have experience in a certain field, they're not well-rounded individuals. But yet they end up getting used in other categories. Listen, this, I think, says it the best about the federal government, and it's definitely this way when it comes to White House advisors. A guy that was on my squad was Korean, spoke Korean, grew up in a Korean family, looked Korean. They put him on Chinese foreign counterintelligence. That's how stupid the Bureau is. He didn't speak Chinese. He didn't look Chinese. He didn't come from a Chinese family. He was Korean through and through. And they put him on Chinese FCI. So that's the way the government works. Now, when you listen to somebody like Christopher Wray talk, or even at the state and local level, Cuomo, what you have to realize is a lot of these people are attorneys. Attorneys are critical thinkers. That's what they're trained in, critical thinking. But most of the people at these executive levels, not all, but many of them, I would say most of them, are narcissists, and they see themselves as superior to other people. And there's nothing usually to back that up. You know, you look at the government and you look at the state of affairs that our government is in, and you cannot deny that those who have led for the past 100 years have had little competency in their job. There's just, you can't get around that. There's no denying it. The country has gone further and further downhill, and to the point where ideologies, not hard work, not ethics and morals, not even religion, are influencing policy. Now, I know people would say, well, what about separation of church and state? The separation of church and state, as you know it, is a lie. As the liberals have created this, and the conservatives go around along with it, nobody's fought it. The reality is that lie is that the government cannot force you to worship a specific religion. That's what that's about. And there's nothing in there about outside influence from religious institutions and how they may influence the decision-making process, for instance. I mean, you go and look at the Supreme Court, and you look at the Constitution. If you ever get a chance to go to the museums in Washington, D.C. and look at the Declaration in the Constitution and how our laws are set up, it's Judeo-Christian foundation that formed our laws. And so the separation of church and state is not what you think it is, but it has become the narrative. And like everything else these days, narratives are what rule, not truth, not law. It's narratives. And when 24-hour news media was created, thank you, Ted Turner, it got worse and worse, and to the point where ideologies like communism, socialism, fundamental Islam, they got a foothold. They got a foundation where they could work from. And strangely enough, the religious Christians took a back seat, and they did what they normally do, nothing. So let me start this soundbite, and you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about here. Once I started it, it sent chills through my spine. And I'm going to start it 3 minutes and 31 seconds into the interview. It's Bret Baier interviewing Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI. And what you're going to hear here is, and I'm going to explain as we go through here, where he's minimizing, avoiding, and flat out lying. And it is a huge slap in the face. It is throughout the entire interview. The interview is 16 minutes long. But the first 3 minutes are talking about China, which is, China's a mess in what we do with them and the virus. So let's start. It's again, Bret Baier and Christopher Wray, and they're going to start with this question.
When you say that China's active, when there is a crisis, for example, the protests after the George Floyd killing, are you seeing foreign intervention to kind of stir up chaos inside the U.S.?
We have certainly seen in the past a variety of foreign adversaries looking to amplify controversy in this country. And they use state media, they use social media. Some of that's through propaganda, some of that's through disinformation, some of that's through just fake information.
And some of that's through the Clintons. But listen, when he's talking here, like in that portion right there, what I always found odd is why the FBI does not inform the people as to where these organizations are working. Because if it's propaganda, if it's on the street, if it's through social media and media, why don't we know that? Why don't we know that? You don't have to tell us who the players are. I know they don't want to mess up the investigations and all, but why don't the people know this? Because the people could ultimately it's targeting the people. So that's like, if drug dealers are in a corner and people are coming there, if you get rid of the drug dealers, the people that are coming there won't be committing the crime of getting the drugs, right? So it's the same thing here. If you help us to understand how China is working, well, the people will understand that's China and they won't be influenced by that. So that's an issue I've always had with the Bureau, is that they guard some secrets extremely too tight. And we need to be able to utilize and strengthen the American people. I should say strengthen and utilize the American people to combat a lot of this stuff, because ultimately we're the target. So let's keep going.
And we are looking carefully at the prospect of foreign influence or foreign interference in all of the protest activity that's occurred over the last.
I don't think they're really looking that hard, to tell you the truth, because this is one thing about the American people, is that you can see the organization of these protests and know that there's outside entities that are influencing, training, and funding this. Listen, I've been a part of a couple of groups that tried to get protests going. One of them was way back when, to try to get people to protest against de Blasio for the way he treated police officers. Nobody wanted to commit to that. Everybody was upset about it. They were on social media. They were talking about how it's, he's slapping de Blasio, slapping the cops in the face and this and that. But nobody shows up. Nobody shows up, right? With these the elderly that died in the United States, over 50,000 elderly in New York City alone, New York State, over 10,000. Many of those people were just in rehab. They were just there for 2 weeks for getting rehab, and because they put COVID positive patients in there, they caught COVID and died. So, but the point is, getting people organized, funding it, teaching them how to do things strategically and tactically takes big money. It takes people committed and being paid. A lot of people that work for the left and doing these protests are actually paid. And that takes big money. And when you look at what they're trying to influence and what their ideology is, you automatically see that it's connected to certain organizations, to not just organizations, but countries and states. Look at the fact that only a couple of countries in the world now still embrace communism, and Russia is not that far away. It's basically a dictatorship with kind of westernized values. But there's no doubt that there is something going on as this unfolds in the United States. It's already unfolded in South Africa, in Australia, in Spain, in London, and Great Britain in general. and it's gone all around the world. The only place it doesn't happen, that you see all this unrest and tearing down statues, is in the Middle East. And I challenge the protesters that they're all about, Black Lives Matter and equal rights. Why don't you go over, and when there's Ramadan going on, go over there and protest and try to tear down something over there. See how that works out for you. Probably not going to work out too well. But we bend over backwards here. So anyway, as I'm getting at, what I'm trying to get at here is that the very nature of how organized they are and the funding that they have, you will never see people showing up on buses to the extent that you do in multiple cities, with thousands and sometimes tens of thousands of people, not just here in the United States, but also around the world, organized exactly the same, unless there is some type of big influence. And the type of influence that they have, that they bring to the table. And I know that Christopher Wray is trying to divvy that up and say that, well, this group does this and that group does that, and they only concentrate on violence, which is wrong. See, the FBI has confused freedom of speech and freedom of the press, and they've skewed the First Amendment to include subversives and those who are trying to change the foundation of the nation. It does not protect those people. I don't care what anybody says. Now, you can have a feeling about somebody, or you can not like something, and you can say that, and the First Amendment protects you from grievance from the government, right? But it does not protect people who are trying to overthrow the government of the United States. It doesn't. You know how I know? Go try it yourself and see what happens. If you're not one of these people, or you're not attached to the left, you're going to go to jail. It happens all the time. So, and he's going to talk a little bit more about this, but this is the very beginning of the downfall of this interview, is the fact that not only are they not telling us how China works, right? They keep that stuff a secret, so the American people don't even know. But he's trying to convince you that they think that they're state actors, but they're not real sure. They know that there's influence, but he's making it very vague. It's not vague at all. Nobody organizes that many people with that effectiveness over and over and over again for a month around the world, but centered here in the United States, pretty much not ongoing here. No one organizes that unless they have some type of state sponsor. It's just, you're not going to, it's not going to happen. The people are not going to not get arrested. People aren't, they can go in without any worry about getting arrested. They're literally tearing down monuments all over the nation. Threatening now to burn the nation down, which is one of the founders of Black Lives Matter said that just today. They're threatening to burn churches. They're threatening to tear down crosses and break out anything with white Jesus on it. These are major issues. Major issues. I'm going to try to find that soundbite from the Black Lives Matter idiot that I'm looking at his picture right here when we get to after I get through this part of the show. So let's continue with the interview.
Last few weeks.
The president has talked, and the administration has talked about Antifa, yet what the Justice Department and you all have moved on is this Boogaloo group that is kind of a right-wing group that is trying to stir up chaos to make it look like it's left-wing.
Okay, so here's the truth on the Boogaloo Boys. All right, I've not talked about this group because I've been monitoring what they do and reading as much as I can on them that is not Bret Baier talking, because he's absolutely wrong here. Many of the Boogaloo Boys are supporters of Black Lives Matter. They are avid cop haters, and they're anarchists. So they're just anarchists from a different perspective. Many of them identify as libertarians. But because these individuals are white and they wear, it's interesting. You never hear them mention throughout this entire thing the Black Panthers or any black separatist groups. They don't mention any of those groups. But the FBI does have an investigation on the Boogaloo Boys. What I've seen about these individuals, now I think they dress awesome. Whoever came up with their design and stuff put a lot of thought into it. But again, folks, getting people organized for the right reasons is almost damn near impossible in this country now. So whereas it may look like these Boogaloo Boys, they think because they're white and they wear Hawaiian shirts and then body armor over it, looks like something we wear in a battle. They assume that they're right-wing white supremacists or just right-wing. They type, it's somehow they've made this right-wing thing identify with conservatives, and we are on the spectrum of liberal to conservative. We are there. This has been talked about for years and years and years, thousands of years. The Greeks used to talk about those on the left, and those on the left were progressive, and they were a problem in their Congress. And then you had the people on the right, which are the people who are slow to change. But when the way they talk about people on the right, it's anyone that has white skin and may like President Trump, but may have completely different values that don't exist in the line of what a true conservative or constitutionalist feels. And they still say they fit the narrative of a right-winger, when in fact they're not. So the way he's describing them, Bret Baier, I know that somebody else has given him that information. And they probably went to Wikipedia, and that's where they got it. So there is an investigation, I guess, on the Boogaloo Boys. But for some strange reason, as he will point out, and this is truthfully, there is no real investigation on Antifa as a group. And we know that Antifa exists. We know that they're global. They're not just in the United States. But he sidesteps this question completely. So it starts off really bad when he gets into the Boogaloo Boy thing and the way Bret Baier describes them, in the way that the director avoids and tippy-toes around this question. But listen to what he says about Antifa now.
I talked to the Attorney General about this last time we sat down. Are there any Antifa investigations ongoing?
The violence that occurred during the protests of the past few weeks is driven by a variety of different motivations and ideologies.
And that's absolutely not true. There's not a lot. There's a few. Like, there are people out there that are extremely upset because they feel like black people have been oppressed by law enforcement and there needs to be change in law enforcement. There's idiots out there that think they need to, they live in some kind of weird fantasy communist dream. But even right there, you start venturing into these people that are communists. They're communists, they're globalists, and they believe that the government as we know it should be overthrown and burnt down and rebuilt in the way they think it should be. They don't realize that the way the Constitution was written was to defend against people like this, to actually flee from tyranny. And these people want to burn it down, burn down freedom, and reimpose tyranny. That's what they want. They won't say that, and many of them don't realize that because they buy into this dream of a government or a world without government, and where everybody works and takes care of each other, and if you can't work, then you take, and if you can give, then you give. This will never work, as we clearly see in this world. Okay, it just would never work. So his description of the reality of this is, from the beginning, absolutely wrong.
Not all the work of any single ideology, movement, or group. We certainly have a number of active, ongoing investigations into violent anarchist extremists.
He will not say communism. He will not say people that are trying to fundamentally overthrow this government. And he will not put these people into a category where they could actually be investigated properly. And the reason is, He's an attorney, not an investigator. And Mueller came in and totally jacked up the way the Bureau used to do things, because it used to be based on how criminal investigators work. But because of 9/11, that all changed. They took the least experienced people and put them straight into terrorism investigations. So it developed its own flavor of investigations. And what they don't understand, what these people like this director don't understand, is you see it when you step out into the civilian world. And also not on their level of wealth and stature. When you step out and you're a regular person, you step out and you start to see and watch these things and deal with these people. It's not like I'm just taking this stuff off the news. I've dealt with these people. They're violent leftists. And the people that they're saying are peaceful protesters, that they're showing up for a different reason. Have you noticed every time the police push back on them, shit starts flowing? They start throwing bottles. People get hurt. They start fighting the cops. That's not a peaceful protest. You're not going to see that at a protest where I go and they're trying to, call out Cuomo for his criminal acts. These are hardworking people, and they're concerned because of the incompetent decisions that Cuomo made. But if the cops rolled up and tell us to leave, well, we'll leave, and we'll go determine another way to do it. But not these people, because they are radicals. They have been radicalized. They are leftists, and it's been happening for the past 100 years, but really the past, I would say, 15 to 20 years, it's gotten extremely bad because of social media, because the indoctrination in schools just went through the roof. Majority of school boards, school board presidents, superintendents, and principals around the country and teachers are far left. They're far left. And conservative teachers right now, they're just dropping like flies. People lying, saying things to get them fired. And we see it. It's out there. It's happening. So he's not going to go down this road. He's not going to go down this road because I'm not sure what his motivation is. I'm not sure if he's a leftist. I'm not sure if Christopher Wray and the people in the federal government that are in this swampish type of mindset want the government to be burnt down and rebuilt. I'm not exactly sure. As we saw what happened with Peter Strzok and McCabe and Comey and even Mueller. You think Mueller was participating in that as well? There's examples there of people that are maneuvering to overthrow the president. So Christopher Wray, I'm not sure. I think he probably is one of those people. And that's why he answers the questions like this. They keep passing the buck you know what it is? It's like rugby. I never played it, but I watched it. And they keep throwing the ball, doing a lateral pass till they get all the way down the field. That's what these guys keep doing. They just lateral pass it right over to another DOJ lawyer that comes up and runs the FBI. And they just keep going down the field, skewing to the left. All right, let's keep going. Come on. Got to reboot it.
Single ideology, movement, or group. We certainly have a number of active, ongoing investigations into violent anarchist extremists, some of whom self-identify or are otherwise linked to the Antifa movement.
So what does that mean? They self-identify or otherwise linked to the Antifa movement. Antifa is not a movement. Antifa is a organized group. How do I see this and they don't see this? If you knew what I knew about what they have at their fingertips to investigate, how could they not know? They either don't want to know or they're hiding something. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but this is absolute crap that he would come out and say this and not admit after even the president sees it. Why does the president see it and he doesn't? Because the president is not the swamp, and he's not a normal guy, but he is a civilian that decided to run for office. He is not a professional politician. So he sees the reality of it and he calls it out like it is. These people will not do this. And it's odd to me from an investigative standpoint. It's very alarming how he says what he just said. The Antifa, what was the word that he used here? Let me play it again.
ongoing investigations into violent anarchist extremists, some of whom self-identify or are otherwise linked to the Antifa movement. But
so he's calling Antifa a movement, not a terrorist group. I don't. What else do these people have to do to meet the definition of a terrorist group? Force, intimidation, and violence for a political aim. I mean, that's pretty much it. And what about the people who are American citizens who are trying to overthrow this government? Or the ones American citizens are going and forming their own quote unquote government-free zones and declaring themselves a foreign entity in some cases, just outside the White House. How are those people not being, how can I put this lightly, either cuffed or killed? Because they are truly treasonous if they're trying to come onto American land and literally steal it and form another country. Actually an aggressive ideological country is what they're trying to do. You don't hear any of this nonsense from me, or you don't hear any of this from Christopher Wray. You only hear nonsense.
I think it's a mistake to try to put a lot of this into sort of neat ideological buckets.
Why? They all fit in neat ideological buckets. And this whole stuff he's going to go into now about lone wolf and people who act alone, it is not true. Look, one person that's a United States citizen may get what they call radicalized. I call it fundamentalized in Islam. I think I'm right, by the way, and I would openly admit if I was wrong, but in this case, I am right. It's fundamentalized. They practice, those who will blow themselves up or cut off heads or do the things they do, they have become fundamental Muslims. They practice the same Islam that Muhammad practiced. But they will put those people into the category of domestic terrorism because they grew up here. Or they will say they were a lone wolf. Well, it doesn't matter if you planned it yourself. If you swear allegiance to a group, there's no membership card to ISIS, right? It's not like, you get pulled over and you pull out your, oh yeah, I'm a member of ISIS. Oh, okay, well, we're going to let you go now. There's no membership. Just like there's no card carrying member of Antifa that I know of. So the fact is, he's not telling the truth. These are organized groups. They just choose not to look at it that way, and I can't figure out why they do it that way. I know there's either some bean counter or some agent who that's his wise idea. We should split this up this way. Probably never worked in investigation. But the truth is, it doesn't cover it correctly. They are steeped in ideology, so they must be identified by that ideology. They are fundamentalized or radicalized in this religion. Therefore, they should be looked at and identified as part of that religion. From a tactical perspective, it makes no sense why you wouldn't do this.
Really about the violence, not the
let me back that up just a little bit.
But I think it's a mistake to try to put a lot of this into sort of neat ideological buckets. We're really about the violence, not the ideology.
I don't know when that became the case with the Bureau, that they only practice busting doors down with people who are violent. There is such a thing as a peaceful overthrow of a country. It's called subversion. And if they do it right, the country will overthrow itself. How is that not something that they consider a viable target? It's getting fishy.
Saw the letter you sent to your FBI family after the George Floyd killing.
Okay.
What that means.
Bret, hold on. There is no FBI family, okay? I'm going to tell you that right now. He is not a father of the FBI family, and there is no family. I mean, all these groups around that say they have the brotherhood this or the brotherhood that or this family this. I mean, this isn't the mob. That's probably the only ones that actually can attest to it's the family. The FBI, we had the old saying in the Bureau, you may love the Bureau, but the Bureau doesn't love you. So he sent a letter out to employees, or an email to the employees in the Bureau, but they are certainly not a family.
What have you been doing to change the dynamic in the wake of all of this?
So I understand completely that there are a lot of people out there in this country who are hurting, who are angry.
Okay. He is not going to speak about the patriots that I get letters from, that I get emails from, that I get phone calls from, that are absolutely in disarray right now. People don't know what to do. They see the country crumbling. They can't quite put their finger on how it's happening, but that's because they haven't studied the tactics of communists and subversives. On a side note, there's an incredible video. If you go to my Facebook, Twitter, and I don't really think I can put this on Instagram, but I'll put it on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn if you're on LinkedIn with me. And I will, it is a Russian KGB agent that defected in the 80s, and he was a propaganda specialist and a specialist in subversion for the KGB, Yuri Bezmenov. So I'll put those links up, and you can go look at those after you listen to this podcast and share those, and also share the podcast. And if you watch it, it's an hour long. There's several different videos, but one in particular that I'll post is an hour long. You are going to, your jaw is going to hit the floor by the time you get finished with that video, because he's already told us exactly what's happening. He's dead now. If he was alive, he would be probably having a heart attack, because everything he said that could happen is happening, and he even laid out exactly how it would happen.
Upset over instances of racism or where the justice system has failed people.
So that's what he's worried. He's concerned, like all the other virtue signalers out there that are at this executive level, not understanding the real problem. This guy definitely, like NASCAR, like Bubba Wallace, have no idea what the reality is of the real problem. They get focused on the Confederate flag. They don't even understand the reality why most people actually fly that. It has nothing to do with race. It's because it's just a symbol of the South. That's all. And NASCAR grew up in the South. So they fly the Confederate flag as a symbol of the South. But they're not going to go and sit down with people at NASCAR and ask them that and say, listen, we appreciate you being honest. And people could say, Bubba, we don't mean anything against you or anybody else. The flag resembles the South. Come up with a better symbol and we'll use that symbol for the South. And don't act like there's no rivalry between the South and the North. There is and always will be. And they're two different mindsets. Has nothing to do with slavery. Has to do with the speed at which things work and the arrogance and the leftist behavior of the people in the North. That's really what it comes down to. But Christopher Wray is going to go directly to that. He's not going to speak to the patriots out there that are thinking we're on the verge of a civil war. He's in a suit and tie. He knows as soon as his tenure's over at the FBI, his life is taken care of. He's not worried about it. These people don't care. And the way he goes right on the political, correct line here, and they do not. And this is what worries me about the patriots in this country. You are not being looked at as oppressed. You are not being looked at as somebody who has a right to defend the country and the nation. All these veterans that took an oath of office to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, you are not being considered in Christopher Wray's statements. You are not. And that is very troubling, because while they're, and I'm not going to, I do this every night. I say this whole same thing, but I'm not going to go into it. The reality with the racial strife that's still occurring in this country has to do more with the inner city and the violence that comes out of the inner city that's affected law enforcement in their tactics. The way that the left has literally crippled the law enforcement community's ability to evolve, both tactically, emotionally, and with good kit and good gear. They've just shut that down. And So law enforcement, because of affirmative action, because of quotas, because of cuts in budgets, they hire people that are not qualified for the job. So they don't know this. They don't think about this. They think that they're going to have, and they'll talk about this here in a second, that they're going to come up with some new training, check the box stuff that's not going to make a bit of difference in the United States. But Christopher Wray is not thinking about any of this. He's concerned with the fact that people are hurting because of racism. And let me tell you something. In my life, in my entire life, I never looked at somebody as black or white. But you turn on the TV right now, and if they're talking about it, well, every news station has, it's all black all the time now. And that's all they talk about. And quite frankly, I don't feel comfortable with it, not because I have light skin, but because I thought we were getting away from identifying people by the color of their skin. But instead of saying, can we just get away from this? And if somebody is a racist, throttle them up a little bit, do what you got to do, or just get away from them. Isolate that person, make them the pariah. We don't do that. It's going to go the completely opposite direction, where the only people that have a voice, the only people that are used as experts or get a show or have a position, in Congress or something, it's going to be based on the color of your skin. I can turn the TV on right now and they'll have 5 black people saying, I'm black, 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 black. I thought we got away from that. It pains me to see the direction that we are going, where myself, a person that was raised to be colorblind and never see the color of somebody's skin, that I am being told now, you will recognize your color and you will recognize their color. None of these protests are even mentioning George Floyd anymore. They're not talking about it on TV. They're already past George Floyd. That's why I know nothing's going to change. You think tearing down statues, that their motivation is George Floyd? It's not. George Floyd, they use as a catalyst, and you're starting to see him fade already. They got everybody worked up using George Floyd and the 15 funerals that he had, and it's going to fade away. And you know what? George Floyd was murdered by a bad cop, and it was bad tactics. And that's not going to get fixed. And defunding the police and getting rid of them doesn't do anything. All right, we'll go back to this now.
We're upset over instances of racism, or where the justice system has failed people of color in particular. I would also say, though, that the law enforcement family is also hurting. And there are lots and lots and lots of police officers out there who are putting their lives on the line every day, who are, unfairly tarred.
Lots and lots and lots, right? How about everybody who is known to be a cop by the community, if they breathe, they're on the line. Their safety is on the line. Cops get targeted all the time and killed, whether it be on the job or off the job. Cops are never off the job. So I would say every cop, Christopher Wray, not many, many, many. Idiot.
By the misconduct of a few. So what we really need is for people to come together, to listen to each other, and to work together to try to figure out a better way forward.
You don't have to figure it out. The ways are out there. Many of us have been talking about this for years. Nobody listens because they want to make a policy change. They don't understand this is going to have to take citizens' involvement. It's not a change that you're going to make in law enforcement alone. It's not a change that you're going to make by recognizing the color of somebody's skin. It's a systematic change in the structure of the inner city and how we perceive good versus evil. Somebody who is fighting the cops, trying to grab their taser, shooting the taser at the cop, they fall directly in line with the use of deadly force. They should not be celebrated. The cops shouldn't be patted on the back. They should be they should be thanked for doing their job, and they should not celebrate the guy who got shot and make him into a martyr, because he's not. He's a criminal. Let's go on.
Talking to the Attorney General, he suggested that there's going to be some kind of federal involvement in setting clear standards for police units across the country.
I think there's a...
Yeah, this is Bill Barr. He's showing another interview with Bill Barr. Listen, I'll be honest with you. I'm no fan of Bill Barr. He is only slightly better of an attorney general than Trey Gowdy was as a congressman. That hardly anything comes out of what Bill Barr does. Yeah, General Flynn gets off, and this happens here, and a little happens there. Bill Barr does nothing to take down the swamp. Why? Christopher Wray. Let's hear what Christopher Wray says. Remember this, when we get to this point, and I say right there, that's Christopher Wray telling you why I know that Bill Barr is part of the swamp.
General agreement among police agencies that we need clearer standards. We have to make sure those standards are trained to, and we have to make sure that there are systems in place that hold officers accountable. So,
and by the way, folks, before we get to how I know that Bill Barr and Christopher Wray are both of the swamp, Barr needs to realize, if he doesn't know this, those standards are already on the book. I mean, every cop knows. We're trained in look, I worked in a small little police department, Camp Robinson National Guard Base, and we were state officers there. We did the training there before we ever went to a police camp. We did 80 hours of on-the-job training. We were told over and over, when you put the cuffs on somebody, the violence stops. If you're having to fight somebody, you get the cuffs on them, unless they are literally still trying to fight you. In that case, you have to find a way to make it safe. Put them in the car. You know, you don't sit on top of their neck for 8 minutes. Everybody knows that. I learned it at Camp Robinson. I learned it in the Air Marshals. I learned it in the FBI. Didn't learn it in the SEAL teams because that's not the way we work. But this is ridiculous. Those standards already exist. Just another useless policy shift.
Is that a federal effort? Does that suddenly become a federal training effort?
I think we're going to need a strong federal participation in this effort in helping to set standards.
So what does that look like?
Well, the FBI's role is a few different things. First, in terms of accountability, we pursue and have for some time civil rights, color of law investigations where excessive force violates federal law. But we also participate in doing training.
Now, right off the bat, I know that that's what the FBI does, but they overlook a tremendous amount of stuff unless it fits in their statistical category of a good case. There's a lot of stuff that goes by the wayside that could fit under color of law, and they don't follow up on it. Listen, there were FBI agents from the Counterintelligence Division in Washington, D.C. that were taking a knee and taking part in the protests in Washington, D.C. in uniform. A complete violation of the Hatch Act. Haven't heard anything from anybody I know in the Bureau that anything happened to those people. So that's how effective they are at that.
And setting best practices for police departments, state and local, around the country.
You know, the president said about these monuments coming down.
We are looking at long-term jail sentences for these vandals and these hoodlums and these anarchists and agitators. They're bad people. They don't love our country, and they're not taking down our monuments.
Is that going to happen?
Look, equal justice is essential, but
he should just say yes. He should just say yes, because that's what should happen, what the president just said.
Violence and destruction of federal property is not the way to get there. And if there are appropriate bases for federal investigations, we'll pursue them.
Okay. I told this story. This fits perfectly here. I told this story a while back about I was ragging on the senior executive service in the government. That's all the executive, the high-level deputy directors, those types of people. And I was hosting on a Sean Hannity radio show. And one of an SESer heard this and wrote me an email telling me the reality that not every SCSer is bad, but that he did appreciate what I was saying, and he wanted to help me understand the reality of what happens. And he told me the story about DHS, where one of the presidents told, it was President Bush, 43, it was right before Bush got out of office, and they were doing something. I don't remember what the policy was, but the president approved it, and he tells the director he wanted this implemented. Well, the deputy director did not like the president and didn't like that policy. So he sat on it for almost 2 years until the president was out of office, and then they just dropped it, and it never got done. Never got done. So just because the president says something, if nobody's monitoring guys like Christopher Wray and the deputy directors like McCabe and the agents like Peter Strzok, the stuff that they tell them to do will never get done. They completely ignore the authority of those over them. And there's more proof of that as we go along here.
What is the biggest threat you see? For a long time, it was.
Wait, so let me back up. Let me back up real quick. What the president's saying here about the thugs and all this stuff. Listen again after I gave you that explanation. Listen to what Christopher Wray says. Now, remember, the president wants this, but Christopher Wray, because he's not the Overwatch does not exist there, can say this.
Down our monument.
Is that going to happen?
Look, equal justice is essential, but violence and destruction of federal property is not the way to get there. And if there are appropriate bases for federal investigations, we'll pursue them.
So basically, he's saying a big if. If something exists, we'll go after them, because that's the way the Bureau works. They don't proactively go after these people. They're not. It's not like the military where they identify an enemy and then they build something to go after them, a case or whatever. So they will wait and see. According to Christopher Wray, it's all about violence. They will wait to see if they reach a certain violence level, and then they will step in and try to charge people with it after they've committed the violence. You see how ridiculous that is? You see how crazy it is? They've already shown that they have a pattern of violence. They already shown that they are unified. They already shown that they use violence, fear, and intimidation for political aim. That's the definition of terrorism. But in Christopher Wray's eyes, they're a belief system, not a group. And he believes that the stuff that they do can only be looked at on an individual basis if it's violent. And that is made up. That is policy, the way he is enforcing it, not the way the president wants it, and not the way the law says it has to be done. That's Christopher Wray. Let me start this again.
Violence and destruction of federal property is not the way to get there. And if there are appropriate bases for federal investigations, we'll pursue them.
What is the biggest threat you see? For a long time, it was radical Islamic terrorism. What's
Wrong.
the biggest threat that
Fundamental.
you see as FBI director?
The biggest terrorist threat here in the U.S., here in the homeland, is what we would call sort of homegrown violent extremists. And these are people who are lone actors,
Wrong.
typically motivated by a variety of different ideologies.
Wrong. There's only a few. It's not like there's a whole bunch. It's not like they act alone. Again, like I said earlier, it's not like they have their ISIS business card or their membership to the Antifa group. These are groups that exist. And if guy over there wants to do, pledges allegiance to Antifa or to Islam and then goes and blows themselves up or breaks windows and kills something, they are not lone wolves. They are participating in ideologically based violence and terrorism. A true lone wolf is Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. That's a true lone wolf. Ted Kaczynski wasn't following anybody's ideology but his own. And nobody worked with him. They use that word alone way too much, and it's taken out of context.
Some jihadists, some others, who go very quickly from radicalization to attack, typically radicalized online, and they're going after soft targets, schools, shopping malls, easy to hit targets and using easily accessible.
Now, here's where he's wrong again. The actual radicalization process, which is really a and see, they're using the wrong term. It's not radicalization. It's fundamentalization. They are being fundamentalized. And it starts in the mosques where they go. It starts in the people that they hang out with. That's how the indoctrination starts. Yes, people may reach out to them, or they may click on this site or whatever, and that's where the actual somebody reaches out to them and says, would you be interested in doing this or joining us for? But listen, the foundation is already there. It's not like they wake up one morning, turn the computer on, and something pops up, and so they just follow that rabbit hole, and the next thing you know, they're radicalized. That's not the case. Many of these people are young, they're zealots, or they're lonely, and so like everybody else, they find religion. And the deeper they go, and I've said this for years, the more religious you go in Islam, the more susceptible you are to being fundamentalized. It's the only thing in this country that I really wish would stay progressive. But he's going to throw everybody into this kind of a category as he talks about this. Listen.
Of terrorists are much harder to detect and prevent in many ways. And so that's what we think of as the greatest threat to here in the homeland.
Wrong. Fundamental Islam is a threat. But right now, as our country is on the verge of being overthrown by communism and or socialism, what do you want to call it? But really, they've almost skipped socialism. They want to go straight to communism. And they don't even want, it's just typical millennials. They don't even want to do the work of becoming communists like as they go through socialism to grow it. They just want to go straight to communism. That's how worthless they are. But the real threat, the greatest threat to this country is the domestic enemy, the communist, domestic, leftist enemy. The politicians, the activists, the rioters, the separatist groups, they are our greatest threat because ISIS can come in and they can blow up 3,000 people or ISIS or Al-Qaeda like they did for 9/11 where they come in and crash planes into buildings and kill 3,000 people. They can take out, they can shoot up a school and kill children. They can, like down by the World Trade Center again, get in a truck and run down and kill like 8 people as they run down the sidewalk. But that's not going to overthrow our government as we know it, which in which case, if it's like any other communist regime, millions of people could die and definitely be imprisoned simply because they don't believe in the communist ideology. And this hasn't happened fast. It's been happening for a long time, but those of us that have been screaming have been ignored and then pushed off of television and radio. So Christopher Wray is absolutely wrong here. Islam, fundamental Islam, he won't say that. Fundamental Islam is a threat, and it's a big threat, and people will die in the future, 100% guarantee because of it. But life as we know it in this country will not stop because of fundamental Islam. Not right now, at least. That is being threatened. Our very essence of what this country is about is being threatened by the left, and that includes the Democrat Party and, unfortunately, liberal people, because they are the ones who are allowing this to happen. All right, here.
What's the morale here at the FBI?
I actually think the morale in the FBI is quite good. Our
Wrong.
attrition rate is down to 0.4%, and there are not a lot of organizations out there.
That's because nobody's quitting their jobs now, Christopher Wray. Do you realize anybody who has a job right now, the attrition rate is basically 0? Freaking moron. Nobody is going to quit their job now because, well, first of all, they've stacked the Bureau and the DOJ with liberals, so they're not going anywhere. Non-operating, the worst. I mean, go look up the video of them kneeling in the protest. The FBI agents, horrible. But almost everybody has a 0% attrition rate. Nobody's quitting their job right now. They know that there's not any jobs out there.
they're public or private, that can say that.
Now, the investigation into the FISA abuse, there was false information provided to the FISA court, according to the IG. Bogus information about this from a rival presidential campaign in the Steele dossier. One of your own top attorneys fabricated evidence to suggest Carter Page was a secret Russian asset when in fact he had helped the U.S. build a case against Russian.
Okay. I've said what I had to say about Carter Page. I still think Carter Page could potentially be a Russian asset, even though he built a case. That doesn't mean anything. Double agents will build cases all day for the Bureau. There's something odd about Carter Page. More to come on that.
One of your own top attorneys fabricated evidence to suggest Carter Page was a secret Russian asset when in fact he had helped the U.S. build a case against Russian operatives. There are a lot of people who look at what has come out, and understanding the Durham report is yet to come, likely this summer. They wonder, will anybody be held accountable?
No, I'll tell you right now, no. Nobody's going to be held accountable. Maybe Comey will go to jail, but it's not like it's Q followers believe that there's all these indictments. There's going to be hundreds of people and the Clintons are going down. It's not happening. It is not happening. This is way too close to the election, and it's not going to happen. Durham, Barr, Christopher Wray, they're all a part of the swamp. I'm telling you right now.
Anything come of this?
Well, first let me say this. I think that IG report describes conduct that I consider unacceptable and unrepresentative of who the FBI is as an institution.
It described criminal behavior of traitors that literally committed treason on this country to try to overthrow a president and an election. This guy is the worst. I mean, think about what they did. They fabricated evidence. That alone should get you put in jail. Fabricating evidence to get a FISA. They used the fabricated evidence knowingly to get the FISA. They spied on Americans illegally. I can guarantee you they were running sources from the Russians to set all this stuff up so they could jam them up. They were conspiring as a group, committing more than one crime in furtherance of their conspiracy, criminal conspiracy, which is a RICO statute, and committed treason. I think they fit the term of treason perfectly. I want to hear that one more time.
I think that IG report describes conduct that I consider unacceptable and unrepresentative of who the FBI is as an institution. And
he sounds like a defense attorney for the guy who did it. He's the director of the FBI.
Cannot be allowed to happen again, and I've made that very clear to our work.
That's his solution. It cannot be allowed to happen again. Folks, this should be heating you. You should be so riveted right now by listening to the words of this guy. This is one of the most egregious interviews I've ever heard. It's going to just float right on by. I don't think anybody else is going to cut it apart like I have. I don't even think Bret Baier understands exactly what is going on in this interview.
For us. Now, I've put in place an entirely new leadership team. And even though I wasn't director at the time,
a new leadership team made of other executives in the Bureau, right? It's not like they reached down and got the best investigators that have been working for 15, 20 years on the street and put them up that. Nope. No. They took other bosses and promoted them into these positions who are at best 10 years in the field at the best, and then started working their way up into the top ranks. See, the Bureau has a whole structure of how they promote people up into assistant special agent in charge. ASAC, that's what it says. Or the big SAC, which is special agent in charge. And then above, when you get into deputy director and director, or all these different positions they have. Assistant director in charge. A dick, and it goes on up. So you got a SAC, the SAC, and a Dick. Those are your big bosses until you get up into the real high-reaching executive levels. And it is absolutely correct. And those are the people that he pulled up. Remember, in the Bureau, you do not work your way up to the top of the ladder. You work your way into a position where you're kind of in a field, and then the ones that want you, they pull you up to the top. You don't work your way up to the top. It's not like that in the Bureau. Okay, this isn't Wall Street. It doesn't work like that.
Of all of this, my team and I are fiercely committed to making sure we fix the problems of the past. We've accepted every finding and recommendation in that IG report, but then gone above and beyond, put in place over 40 corrective measures that enhance our training, strengthen our processes, build in more oversight and accountability, and
what?
Have referred employees, current employees, for discipline.
Oh, man. They are going to discipline them. I know people who've been disciplined for nothing, right? I know a woman who got fired, who was a support staff, because one of the bosses told her that because she stayed somewhere on a job, she was there for the job, and she was there for a longer period of time, but it was like an hour or two or something, and they were like, just put it down as an extra or as another day that you were on. I guess she wasn't approved for that other day, so she put it down, and they fired her for that. They fired her. I remember my boss when on my first squad, and they give us government credit cards, and again, we have the highest clearance that you can get in the government, top secret SCI. I mean, there's other categories of clearances, but really, top secret SCI is one of the most trusted classifications that you can be trusted with. And I was getting gas. Now, you would think this wouldn't be a problem, right? I was getting gas in my FBI car, my bureau car, and I accidentally used my personal credit card. And so I got the receipt. I didn't think it was anything bad. I mean, there's cameras there that know that I'm getting gas in my bureau car, but I used the receipt, or I took the receipt, and I go and did the operation because we were in a hurry. We were on a surveillance. I go and I tell my boss when we get back to the office, I said, hey, listen, Conrad, I probably shouldn't say his name, but I said, hey, listen, I used my personal credit card to get gas. I was in such a hurry, I didn't realize which credit card I was using. He said, yeah, you're probably going to have to eat that. And I'm like, what do you mean? Can I just put in for the money? He said, if you do that, there's going to be investigated. They're going to investigate you. They're going to think that you did something wrong. And I'm like, it was like $30. He goes, you're going to have to eat it. So I didn't ever put in for it because I didn't want to get investigated as though I was a liar. That's how ridiculous this is. I'm so fired up, I don't even remember what I was saying. Let me rewind this again.
Then our processes build in more oversight and accountability, and have referred employees, current employees, for discipline.
So he's talking about referring people for discipline that tried to overthrow the government. Meanwhile, for $30, I could have got investigated because I used my credit card to buy bureau gas, not the other way around, not using the bureau card to buy my personal gas. That's how ridiculous this is. I know, like I said, a woman who got fired over $50-something, like $59 or $56 on a travel claim. And that isn't even the start of it. I could tell you a whole nother story, which I will one day, about another friend of mine who terrible process of being fired or arrested by the Bureau, fired by the Bureau, charged with 4 felonies, and then eventually the Bureau dropped everything, reinstated him, gave him all his back pay, and then still gave him one of these punishments that he's talking about, these disciplines, for, a certain amount of days off. And they practically ruined his life for it. It's one of the reasons why I used to have nightmares that the SWAT team was coming to get me from the Bureau, and that they were arresting me, because I literally had to sit and watch that happen. It's the craziest thing ever.
Now, having said that, the most senior people involved in this activity, in this report, are long gone, either terminated, some during my tenure, or retired or resigned.
So what Christopher Wray is saying is that because these people are long gone, and like he's talking about, like they turned into dust and floated away. I mean, they know where they are. They should be brought back in and charged with treason and conspiracy, and they should be locked up for the rest of their lives and made an example of. And in certain cases, I believe given the death penalty. It would have happened 50 years ago. What's changed? The swamp's gotten bigger. That's what's changed. This guy is so full of crap. Listening to him, it literally makes my skin crawl.
Has the FBI disclosed every piece of evidence related to the Durham inquiry?
We've cooperated fully with the Durham investigation. In fact, we even have, a lot of people don't know this, we actually have agents assigned to working on the Durham investigations.
Working on it or overwatching it so that they can know how to maneuver? Which one is it? Because I wouldn't doubt if it's the other way around. This is the biggest bunch of BS there is just about in this, is he tries to backpedal and show that we try to do this or we try to do that when it comes to transparency.
We're very much lashed up with that.
Congress says they have a tough time getting documents and things from you. Senator Grassley in particular about the Michael Flynn calls. Were you responsible for holding back from Congress some of that stuff? So
Bret Baier's excellent question. He says that the Congress has said that they are not getting the information that they request, and they're supposed to provide it. And he is asking him this critical information that they need in their investigations. Are you the one that's withholding this information? Now, an honest person would say, no, I'm not the person. And I'm trying to find out who is, because I'm going to hammer them for it. And they're also going to get charged with some stuff for withholding information from Congress when they request it. But he doesn't do that. He gives the line like a criminal would, where he minimizes the bureaus as though the bureau is his mob family, and he minimizes their participation in this and his own. Listen to this.
I think we've tried very, very hard to be transparent.
I think we've tried? What kind of answer is that from a director? This guy was an attorney at the DOJ. He's a successful civilian attorney, and now the director of the FBI, and he says, I think we've tried. That's his answer.
Cooperative.
Let me rewind that.
Were you responsible?
I have to listen to stuff twice. It bothers me so bad.
Some of that stuff?
I think we've tried very, very hard to be transparent and cooperative with all the relevant congressional committees. We've produced all sorts of information and tried to really lean forward.
Why?
Hey, so-and-so, did you sit on George Floyd's head and kill and murder him? Well, I think I tried to not murder him. I think I tried to just hold him there. That's how stupid that sounds. Okay, that guy murdered George Floyd. This guy, Christopher Wray, absolutely 100% has done exactly what I was talking about with that DHS executive, where they have purposely withheld information. Purposely. Why? Because they're protecting their own asses, and they don't jam up other senior executives. It's like a cult.
Did it take so long for the material to come out for Horowitz, publicly, like with the FISA, the Flynn 302s, the reports? It seemed like it took forever. Why was that? I mean, if it wasn't court orders and the IG's efforts, we wouldn't know anything about any of this.
For the IG's efforts, we've bent over backwards to be transparent and cooperative with the IG, and he actually, in his report, talks about how
This is just, I'm telling you, this is the greatest pearls of wisdom for you that I've ever heard in an interview. Let me tell you, the IG is just as much of a swamp. That's the Inspector General for the FBI or the DOJ. He is just as much a part of the swamp as Christopher Wray and Bill Barr and Comey and Mueller. They're all the swamp. They are all the swamp. And so if the IG is bragging about him, if you sat and listened to what the IG said, it was also a bunch of crap. Listen, folks, If you and 5 other people or 10 other people conspire to overthrow the president and you get caught, they're not going to write a report about you individually and determine, and they're not going to reassign you guys or let you quit and go on with your life while the investigation unfolds. You would go to jail, and you would sit in jail most likely if it was that egregious of an act. You would go to jail, and your bond would be so high, or maybe you wouldn't have bond because they'd be afraid that you would flee the country because you're probably working for a foreign entity, that you would sit in jail until there was a court case, and then you would go to jail for the rest of your life. What the IG talked about was writing a report about Comey or writing a report about McCabe. They don't write reports anywhere else except for these senior executives. There should have been a full-fledged investigation rolling out, and these people should have been locked up, and then they should have done everything they need to do, just like a real case, so it unfolds, they get charged, and go to jail. So the IG not only failed in his job because he's a swamp guy, and it's minimizing throughout the entire thing, he's also bragging that Christopher Wray is giving him everything that he needs to know. Hey, Mr. Gambino, what do you think about this other Gambino over here? Well, I think he's a good guy. I think he's done everything right. I think that's exactly what this is. It's the mob.
Cooperative and transparent we were with him.
The Flynn defense attorneys, Michael Flynn, former NSA, National Security Advisor, said they were not provided the exculpatory evidence that eventually came out. During the trial. They weren't provided it. Who held that back?
Decisions about producing documents in a criminal prosecution are typically handled by the prosecutors. I will say that, of course, the Flynn investigation, which took place before I started, and then by the time I started was in the hands of the special counsel's office, is something that has, in my view, raised serious concerns and questions, which is why I ordered an after-action review by
an after-action review. Bitch, start charging people. How about that? With criminal acts. Good gosh. You charge a guy with 4 felonies, it's an employee, because he accessed the wrong database. And in this case, you got people trying to overthrow the government, and they won't do an investigation, a criminal investigation.
Our inspection division to take a look at whether or not the FBI's policies and procedures need to be changed, and if there are any current employees left who may bear any responsibility.
So he is saying that people who used to work for the Bureau who are gone will not be charged, as though the law somehow protects them because they don't work for the Bureau anymore. No, that is not the case. That is not the case. There is, to my knowledge, there is no statute of limitations. If they found out you were a spy or you committed treason, you could be 95 years old, about to die, and they could charge you. This is ridiculous.
This interview happened before the appeals court decision on the Flynn case, siding with the Justice Department. But the FBI says no matter how it's decided, the after-action review will continue. The president gave an interview in which he said just the other day, what does he think about this whole process as we wait for the Durham report? And he characterized it as treason.
It's treason. Look, look.
Listen, if I said it once, I said it a million times. This guy gets it. Why? Because he's not a part of the swamp. And when he looks at this, he looks at it just like you and I would look at it. Even when I was an agent, I would still be looking at this like, man, there's something not right here. And people I talk to that are agents are like, or especially detectives and law enforcement, they're like, man, this is bad. I mean, they're not looking at any of these people for something wrong. Trump gets it. He gets it because he is not a part of the swamp, and he's a civilian who ran for office. So you know what treason is? You look at what these people did. It's treason. Good gosh.
It came out a long time ago. I said, they've been spying on my campaign. Turned out I was right.
What do you, looking at what you know, think this is?
On the Crossfire Hurricane matter, that's the subject of the IG report, I think it describes conduct that is unacceptable.
Is it just me? Do you please tell me that if you understand what I'm saying, I want you to do me a favor. All right. I think this is a very important podcast. I want you to take the link and send it to everybody you can on social media. I don't care what platform it is. And you tell them, text it to your friends and say, you've got to listen to this, because if you ever want to understand exactly how corrupt the government is and how they doublespeak, listen to this and you will see. Please. And if you want to reach out to me, Jonathan T. Gilliam on Instagram and on Facebook and YouTube. You can also listen to these on YouTube. And then on Twitter, @JGilliam_seal. You can look up Jonathan T. Gilliam there as well. And I leave my direct messages open so you can, if you have a question about this, if I can get to it, I'll answer it. But do you see what's happening? Do you understand that you would go to jail for the rest of your life if you did these acts? Especially if you're in law enforcement. Listen to this again.
Looking at what you know, think this is?
On the Crossfire Hurricane matter, that's the subject of the IG report, I think it describes conduct that is unacceptable. Period. Full stop, and cannot be allowed to happen and will not be allowed to happen in
But whether
today's
it's criminal
FBI.
or not.
So he said it will not and should not and will not be able or be allowed to happen in today's FBI. He said nothing about those people that did that. And Bret Baier just asked him, what about a criminal charge?
Criminal decisions, charging decisions, prosecution decisions are not made by the FBI director. Those are made by across the street at the Justice Department by the prosecutors.
But the FBI can start an investigation and then approach the U.S. attorney and say, we've got this, and what do you think? But in this case, folks, you're talking about people who tried to overthrow the government. And he is saying, literally, whether it be Flynn or the president or anything, because it's all related. It's all the same people. He's saying, well, we don't have the ability to make those decisions. Dude, you're the director of the FBI. You can't sit down with Barr, and if Barr's the one telling you no, then we got major problems. And I do think that they're both coming to the same conclusion. We're not going down this road because we're going to expose the cabal that we exist in. That's the reality of it. Again, do you understand the laws that you must abide by? You, the civilian, Joe and Jane civilian, that would put you in jail do not apply to these people. This is dangerous.
Somebody here altered that FISA report, and that would be a criminal offense, right?
And that individual no longer works at the FBI.
Okay, so he's saying, yes, that was a criminal offense, and they no longer work here. They got fired. That's it? My buddy had handcuffs put on him because he accessed the wrong database. The guy that took pictures of the submarine, and rightfully so, went to jail and finally got a pardon, I believe. And I believe he should have been charged and gone to jail. Nobody takes pictures of submarines that's in the Navy, especially if you're around there. You know not to do that. Don't act like you're not. I hate when I hear his mom and interviews about him, and they're making it sound like he was a victim. He got what he deserved. Hillary Clinton and the rest of these people did not get what they deserved. I don't think it's a good example to cross-compare these things, because you don't have to compare it. He's guilty. What he did was wrong. And what Hillary Clinton and Christopher Wray and all these other people are doing, the only thing you have to show is that if we did it, we would go to jail for the rest of our lives. But they do it, nothing happens.
I want to get out in front of the Durham investigation.
Are you worried what the impact is going to be when that all comes out?
That Durham investigation, I'm telling you folks, it is only going to be maybe Comey. Don't expect anything great. There is no great master plan like everybody believes it's in follows Q. There's no master plan, okay? It doesn't exist. If you can't tell that by now, you've got problems.
Knowing what you know.
I think allegations of misconduct need to be taken seriously. I think there are serious questions that have been raised here, and they need to be given a serious look. And whatever the impact is, the impact is.
Have you?
He has no urgency in this at all. There's not like, Brett, we're on the verge of collapse in this nation. We got to get on top of this and find out who tried to overthrow this government. We need to lock them up. And all these little lackeys that are running around like programmed robots, we got to get on top of this and get ahead of that. And we got to stop it. We got to start looking at charging them with stuff so we can stop the subversion. You're not hearing any of that stuff from the director of the FBI.
Ever one-on-one gone to the president in the Oval Office and say, hey, listen, this is what I know. This is what the FBI did. And here's what it is.
I have not met with the president one-on-one.
You've not met ever with him one-on-one?
No.
And this president has, well, publicly said he wants to see the jury is still out, is what he said about you.
Let's see what happens with him. Look, the jury's still out.
If you don't meet one-on-one with the president and he says the jury's still out, are you worried at all about how the president thinks about you and the job?
No, I think I have a very professional relationship with the president, which is, I think, what every FBI director and every president should have. And I've certainly had plenty of occasions where I've met with the president, just with others present, right?
You're on Senator Graham's list to testify. Do you expect to be up there testifying in his investigation?
This is really nothing here.
I'll see. I've
Except for listening
quite frequently.
So he's saying right here, I'm going to back it up just a little bit. He says that he testifies quite frequently. It's the most useless thing that a director does. It's all smoke and mirrors. They can hem and haw, but like I said, nothing gets done, and it's just appeasement. That's all it is.
Right?
You're on Senator Graham's list to testify. Do you expect to be up there testifying in his investigation?
I'll see. I've testified quite frequently in this role. It seems to be a routine part of the job.
What's the toughest thing you deal with every day?
The sheer volume.
Okay. There's somewhere in here, I guess I missed it, where he's talking about Bill Barr. And Bill Barr, he asked him if they get along. And where is it? Maybe that's at the end of this. Let me fast forward it real quick. Hold on. Okay, so I went through the video. I cut the show for a second, and I found the video. Now, remember what I keep telling you about Barr. And I was saying you got to listen. Remember and listen to this, and you will see exactly what I'm talking about when I said that they are all part of the swamp. They all eat together. They go to church together. Their wives know each other. Their kids grow up together because they exist in and around Washington, D.C. for an entire life, and they never leave. And they just keep getting appointed to different things. And that's why the country is in such bad shape. Because like the Bureau, there's very few people in D.C. that literally succeeded to the top. These are people who were pulled to the top by the powers that be because they are in the same mindset, same ideology. And that's what the swamp is. So now listen to this as Bret Baier asked him this question. Most important question in here.
The iceberg.
And your relationship with the Attorney General?
The Attorney General and I have, I think, an excellent working relationship. I value him as a friend and a colleague.
Director Wray, we appreciate the time.
So that right there shows you that they know each other, and he values him as a friend and a colleague. Remember, folks, these people know each other. That is, I can't go any more into what is important about this show and how important it is that you share this episode, because as you have seen, what is happening in the federal government is very reflective of what's happening on the streets. It's just on the streets, you see them tearing down statues. You see them talking about, this life matters, but that one doesn't, or that life matters, but that one doesn't. And it's chaos. But look past the chaos. And what do you see? You see that George Floyd is not being mentioned anymore, that they're already starting to talk about autonomous zones and cop-free zones and getting rid of this and getting rid of that. They're starting to admit that they're communist. You look past all the violence that's going on out there, and what do you see? An organized group of people that are trying to overthrow the government. And when you listen to Christopher Wray, you hear the exact same thing. I'm Jonathan Gilliam. This is The Experts. The truth has arrived. Peace, and we're out of here.